Welcome to another episode of the Golden Moment podcast. My name's Mijo Biscan. In this episode, I spoke to Lorrae McKenna. Lorrae is a band manager. She's a label manager. She runs a label called Our Golden Friend. She's also been doing the PR for Isolade, which is an online festival that has started since the pandemic hit, which is quite an amazing event. And we talk about that in this podcast. We talk about a lot of things. Talk about artist management, having a really great email newsletter because the Our Golden Friend one is so awesome. We talked about showcasing music, talked about mental health for artists during this time, and many other topics. So without further ado, here is Lorrae McKenna. So I'm here with Lorrae McKenna. Welcome to this podcast. Awesome to have you.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. So, well, maybe we could get started by you telling us a little bit about what you do, some of the roles. Yeah, I mean, you wear a couple of hats and what you're involved in, and then we'll go from there.
Okay, cool. Well, my name's Lorrae, and I run a little company called Our Golden Friend, which is a record label and an artist management collective based in Melbourne, Australia. And I've been, we're actually just about to celebrate our 5th birthday on the 1st of December. Our Golden Friend will be 5 years old, which is really interesting. I actually kind of forgot that was happening this year. And then all of a sudden I was like, wow, we're 5 years old this year. So that's amazing. Exciting.
So this can be a little bit of a reflective episode of, you can celebrate all your wins, challenges. We can do a full review.
Definitely a 5 year. If someone asked me where I was going to be in 5 years, I don't know if I would have said here, but this is where I am. So that's good. I've ended up somewhere. So that's better than ending up nowhere. And 5 years. Yeah, it seems a long time. And prior to setting up my own business, I have worked in the music industry. Now it's kind of going on close to 15 years or maybe a little bit longer than that. But so it's been 5 years out on my own, but much longer in the music industry, working for a lot of different people and places before that.
Yeah. So I'm guessing, you've seen a lot change. It feels like, I don't know if this is true to say, but it feels like the last 15 years have probably seen almost the greatest disruption in the music industry and changes and shifts. I don't know if that's necessarily true. Maybe going back to the mid-90s just when the internet happened, but
I would definitely agree, because when I started working in the music industry, streaming services weren't a thing. So there was no streaming services. It was all about iTunes, and iTunes was only very, very new as well. And it was just about, downloading those MP3s and, it was just kind of that era of eradicating illegal downloads of in a way, and like refocusing people on paying for music, which they hadn't done for, which had been such a huge thing through the 90s to the early 2000s of just, illegally downloading music. And then finally iTunes kind of seemed to legitimize it a little bit and allow that. And then, it became a thing of like downloading albums and paying for songs and that type of thing. And then all of a sudden it moved to the streaming world. So I would say in the last 15 or, 17 or so years that I've worked in the music industry, it's definitely seen a lot of changes in that respect.
Yeah. And so maybe if we continue along this trend line of talking about that big shift that happened, kind of, I suppose the streaming platforms really, because even before that, people kind of expected to pay for music. Like if you want an item, like I want this thing, I've got to like pay for it. And then streaming turned into obviously a subscription thing where you have zillions of songs. So from either a label side or band manager, artist manager side, what has been the main sort of challenge there? is it to go with the flow of streaming, or is it to figure out revenue streams from that?
I mean, there's a lot to be said about streaming and the way it works and how artist friendly it actually is. And, you know, there's a lot of dialogue about Spotify at the moment and how they're actually, you know, a tech company and not really a music company. And, but, you know, that for, as far as streaming services go, that's where the main source of income is coming from, because they at the moment have the largest market share in streaming. In Australia, I think in America and in other countries it's slightly different. There's other streaming services, but if we're talking about Australia specifically, Spotify definitely has the biggest market share of streaming services. So that is obviously where most of the revenue comes from for artists and labels at the moment. So it's a double-edged sword, because there's a lot of gatekeepers to the streaming world, and it can be really hard to navigate and to make it work, especially for independent artists or artists who are self-managed and don't really understand how to make it work for them. It can be quite confronting and seem a little bit unfair, and you know. So, yeah, there's definitely been a lot of challenges. I, for one, you know, welcomed streaming. Like when it first started as a thing, I was like, this is actually going to work, because instead of the model of iTunes where you purchased, you know, an album and you had it and that's it, you purchased it one time and then it would be on your computer for the rest. It was just a one-time purchase. Streaming has the ability for songs to make income forever. You know, like you put a song up there, that's never going to go away. Perpetuity. So sometimes if you think about that, the more it's going to get streamed at the time, the more money it's going to make. Whereas the old model of iTunes, it was one purchase and some, you know, that's it. That consumer will probably never purchase that album again. Whereas in the streaming model, you know, one fan could listen to a song 1 million times in their lifetime if they wanted to, you know. So that's, there's a lot more. And I think if you look at it that way, it can give you a little bit more hope, because you're like, oh, you know, a song, and also it gives songs different life. Like a song could be out for like 10 years and then it gets synced on an ad or something happens, and then all of a sudden the streams come. It doesn't necessarily, you know, it can give songs a bit of a longevity as opposed to not being discovered, you know, being discovered immediately and then kind of not having the option to purchase them again, I guess.
I suppose once that thing is uploaded on Spotify or YouTube or whatever, people can discover it 10 years later. Like even if someone's doing sync for a film or whatever, it's available. But if it's stuck on iTunes somewhere and the only way to really get access to it is to buy it, then it's kind of hidden away.
I think that's a really exciting thing as well. I feel, you know, I'm an eternal optimist, so I always like to think that, you know, there's a lot of people in the music industry that think, you know, an album has a cycle and that's it and then it's done, you know, within a year or so of it being released. But I think music discovery now is really exciting, and you know, sometimes, you know, you never know who's going to hear your song at what point, especially because of the way that, you know, the algorithm on Spotify works. Like you finish listening to an album and it will just start serving you up random music, and you never know what could come through to you, and that's kind of exciting. And you never know who could hear your music, and then it could end up in another place. And so I like, you know, what technology has brought to the music listener and to the music industry, this kind of new way of discovering music, whereas there had to be, you know, when I started in the music industry, like quite a long time ago, there was a very specific way of marketing music and reaching an audience. But now there's kind of more of an opportunity for people to find things in a semi-organic way, I think, which is exciting.
This thing of being the optimist, it's I think it's become a bit of a theme of the podcast, because often, you know,
I get to a question like, what motivates you to keep going, or what's exciting about what you do, or whatever. And the idea of being positive, being optimistic, seems to be one of the keys that allows people to embrace the changes. It can be quite confronting, like as an artist, when streaming comes along or something, like a lot of people just rebel against it and say, we don't like this and this is blah, blah, blah. But it seems that the optimists just go, okay, cool, well, there must be something good about this, or there must be a way that I can integrate it, or there's an acceptance that it's changing and I have to adapt.
I think I think in the music industry, you have to, if you're not adaptable, you won't be successful. Like, you just can't. Like, the changes, like everything changes so quickly, and if you're not at the forefront of those changes and understanding them and understanding the audiences and the music consumers and where they are and how they're listening to music, then you will get left behind. Like, you can't really just think that you can do something the same way for a really long time. And I think that's where, like, bigger major labels and also companies like Apple even, like, have got stuck because they kind of thought they could do something a certain way, but because of all the changes in the technology, they kind of even got left behind. Like, the fact that I just feel like the fact that Apple didn't get onto the streaming thing, they just ignored it in those early stages, and they've lost that battle, and I don't know if they'll ever win back the market share from Spotify. I mean, yeah, it's really interesting, but and the same can be said about major labels. They've done things a certain way for a really long time, and now, because of technology and because of artists having more access to create music themselves and setting up their own labels and doing things independently, that the major label models had to change a lot too to allow for that. And for a long time they didn't. They were kind of like, nope, we're going to do, this is how we've done it forever, so we're going to stay that way. But I think they're definitely looking at different ways of doing things now because they have to.
Do you think major labels are looking for artists in a very different way?
I think they're doing a lot of different things. Like, it's still within their huge constructs of, but I think they're definitely, I mean, the rise of TikTok has taught a lot of people a lot of things about actual viral content and how crazy, if because I think TikTok is a really good example of, it's pretty much the only social media now that is really, really can be viral, and it's based on an algorithm and nothing else. Like, Spotify and Instagram and everything, it's so closed off what gets fed to you. It's really hard for viral content to get through the way it does on the way TikTok works, basically. So, yeah, I think that's really interesting, and that's taught a lot of people a lot, especially the music element of TikTok, which they haven't quite figured out how to monetize, but they're seeing that if someone random does a TikTok video that goes quite viral, the streams will pick up immediately on Spotify and other things. So they see the correlation there at the moment, which is interesting.
Yeah. So on the topic of social media, because that's another thing that in the music industry didn't exist 15 years ago.
Yeah.
It was, well, I suppose in the way of MySpace it did.
It did. And there was just a little bit of, Facebook was just very new then. And there was no Instagram, I don't think, 15 years ago. But 10 years ago there was Instagram. But yeah, I think those things definitely changed. But because, again, as I said, and all the changes that Facebook have had internally, which has affected the way things have done, because originally Facebook was quite a great tool for bands. And, once everyone kind of abandoned MySpace and moved to Facebook, it was like, for a little while there was a way to create audiences through Facebook without having to pay for anything, but now it's all, they've locked it all down. Like they got everyone addicted and figuring it out and building audiences and doing all this stuff, and then they shut all the gates to it. So very interesting.
And when it comes to like the band, I don't know if you call it band management or artist representation, whatever you call it. How much do you now talk about social media with those artists versus, well, maybe 15 years ago you already were, but as far as like having it as a central thing that they're working on or developing, or that you develop with them?
I think it's really personal to each artist. Like I think social media is, I tend to not get too involved with some of my artists on it, because some of them, I feel like social media works best if it's authentic and organically coming from the artist. Like I don't think you know, audiences can see through manufactured stuff or stuff that is not content that looks to be organically created from an artist. And the things that audiences will connect with is, you know, genuine output, as opposed to something that's really clinical and it looks like it's just going through the marketing motions. So you know, and also with artists that I work with, some of them, they don't like social media. It's not their personality. It's not what drives them. And I think that's okay. Like, I think, you know, you kind of have to have a presence on there, but you should use it the way that you feel most confident and comfortable using it. I just don't think it should be forced upon people. And I think it's been very, very interesting this year in particular because of COVID and everything that has happened. And there's been this whole push for live streaming and live stuff on all of the different platforms. And again, that's not for every artist. Like there's some artists that they don't want to sing to a camera. They don't want to sing to a camera in their bedroom. It's not the best way that they connect with people. So again, it's like, it was great for a moment, but I spoke to one of my artists yesterday who had to do a live stream, and after she finished it, she said, that's the last one. I can't do any more this year. Like, that's it. It's just like, I need like a break from that, because it can just feel a bit, she called it shouting into the void. Like, because
it's
you know,
a weird sensation.
It's so different to performing to an actual audience and having actual humans interact with you. So there's a lot of different. So back to the question, social media, I think it's important to have a presence, but I feel like authenticity and organic content works much better than anything that is heavily orchestrated. That's my feeling on it. So
cool. I'm sure lots of artists who are listening are going to be sighing with relief to hear that. It's like, okay, cool, I don't have to be on there like 24/7 and be posting 17 pieces of content a day.
It does help if that's part of your personality and that's what you want to do, then sure, like, you know, but if it's not, then that's okay too. And I don't think people should beat themselves up about it. You should just do what makes you feel good, because at the end of the day, I find social media has a huge impact on people's mental health. Like, you know, sometimes too much of it, it can just make you feel unhealthy in the brain, and nobody likes that. And so you should use it in a way that makes you feel healthy and confident. And if that is posting 17 times a day and talking to everyone and doing live streams, and amazing. But if it's not that, then that's okay too, I think.
Great. That's awesome. With the artists who are less inclined to do it for whatever reason, what are some of the other channels that you are able to support them with, or, you know, get word out about them? Is it more of the previous traditional type media things, or online blogs, or What are some things you
Yeah,
tend to focus
I
on?
feel like if, we still definitely, even for the ones that don't love to post on social media all the time, we still post when it's something big and important, or it's like there's new music, then obviously there will be some type of social media presence, because there has to be, as I said, but it doesn't have to be as heavily, thought out as some other things. But, just the general, all of the old school stuff still does work, sending out a press release, having strong media contacts, having all, the contacts with all the, I hate this word, but like tastemakery people, like, getting the music to the people who, will like it and listen to it, and then who they have a platform to share it in, other ways. And also radio, I still think radio is really important. A lot of people, there's this debate, has streaming services taken away from radio? But I personally don't think so. I still like to discover music. I listen to Triple R a lot, and I tend to discover music that I haven't heard, just because some of the presenters on that radio station have really great taste and find music in an organic way. And that's also exciting, an exciting way to kind of find music. And that's always existed, radio. So I'm glad it still has some level of worth.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, it's been around a long time now, like as a medium for listening to music or hearing music. And I suppose some of that comes back to maybe your genre or audience and where they're hanging out. But it seems like the bands you love and are interested in are in that zone of, Triple R and things like that. Awesome. And so this year has been crazy, if you've noticed. And you've also been involved in Isolade. Is that like doing the promotion and stuff? And I've before we get to that, I want to tell you that your emails that you send out are awesome. And I'd like to talk about this briefly. Because and maybe you'll be very happy that your emails are really landing and they hit the spot. But because people get so much email and they get so much noise at them, and I'll have to like leave a link to some of, I don't know, your emails or something so people can go check them out. But they're always like interesting. They have color, they have movement, they have real personality, which is lacking very often. So I wanted to ask you about that, how that sort of evolved, or whether that was, deliberate, how you found your sort of voice to do that, whether that came very naturally, whether blah, blah, blah. But
well, I mean, I feel like I'm really happy to hear you say that, because I love our newsletter, and it's definitely something that I've thought about a lot, because as you said, there is a lot of noise out there, and people get a lot of things in their inbox, and it's like when we think about doing the newsletter, I always think, what would I like to read? Like, yes, we want to tell people what our artists are doing, and we want to, we've got new music, here's the shows coming up, but like also I want to share things like, what everyone who works with me is liking this week, like just random stuff. And I have Macquarie, who works for me. She puts together the newsletter. We all contribute to it, but she is the brains behind laying it all out and making it look pretty and having the cool gifs and all of that stuff. So she's really amazing at just contextualizing all of the things that we've been doing. And and I think also this year, as we went through this big change and there was less things happening, less live shows and things, we kind of, through the newsletter, decided to, look at the personalities from all of our bands and share recipes and all different types of things, to kind of connect on a different level, to give people a bit more, something else other than, you know, we were all still here. We're all still in lockdown. We're all cooking sourdough bread. So, you know, we kind of like fed off that by including things like that in the newsletter. To have a bit more of a personal connection rather than just, you know, spraying out marketing jargon at the end of the day. But I'm glad that you find them interesting. So
definitely,
that's good.
I can see the work that goes into it. They're like a little personalized party or something. You know, it's like, we're gonna have like a little, something cool's gonna happen here is like the expectation, which I think is a very powerful thing to set up for people when they're flying through their inbox. And also the thing of, like you mentioned, like recipes and things, like I've heard as an artist for years, like, you know, send stuff out to your email list like recipes, and I always thought like, oh man, I'm not doing that, like that's who's going to care about that? But you've been able to like integrate it still again, like with your voice and with the brand and with the aesthetic that makes it feel very natural. So kudos, I think.
Thank you. Well, I'm glad you're a fan. A fan of the GF newsletter is a fan of mine. So a fan of our label. So I like that.
Any artists out there who want to know how to do a newsletter should go and sign up. So I'm going to leave links, obviously, under this podcast so they can go check that out. But talking about Isolate and just the concept of it and how it you know, has started, and it's like, it's, I don't know if you expected it to really go this long, but
no,
what was the idea in the beginning, and where are you now?
I just remember Emily Ullman came to me and she was like, I'm going to do this thing because it was the first week of lockdown basically, and it was all the way back in March. And she was like, you know, and she,
what it is actually a little bit too.
Well, Isolate is basically kind of an online festival that was spawned during the first week of lockdown in Melbourne, because I feel like Victoria kind of got locked down first in a way before the rest of the country. And I remember Emily being like, because that was when we were all like rattled. We were all like, what is happening? It happened very quickly. Like, thinking back to that point in the year just seems crazy to me, because I was meant to be traveling to America and going to South by Southwest and all of these things. And then I had bands on tour. I had like 4 of my bands were on tour, and one of them was already in America. 2 of them were on tour in Australia. And then as things, like as it shut down, like we had to bring everyone home from different places. And then I didn't end up traveling. I was meant to leave Australia, I think on around the 12th of March. And I made a call then not to go to America. And it was really funny. Friends of mine who were actually going to move to America, that I was flying on the Tuesday, and their flight was on the Friday, and I was speaking to them, and they actually went to America, but then were home 2 weeks later. So and they were planning to move there for good, like, and ended up coming back. So it's just, it seems like a crazy time. So when all of that was happening, and then all of a sudden we went from like having all these shows booked for all of our bands and then nothing. And we just were like, oh. And I feel like it was like Emily and Rhiannon from Merpire had been working on another project together, and they came up with this concept of an online festival where they would just have artists play on their Instagram, go live on their Instagram, and then hand over to the next artist. And so when it first started, there was this thing where they used to do split screens with the 2 artists, like, but they don't really do that anymore because there was so much learning and changing with the whole way things worked right at the start. But that very first week, I mean, Emily rang me up and she's like, I'm going to do this thing. I don't really know what it's going to be, but we're going to try to do 2 days. I think it was Saturday and Sunday. And it went for like 8 hours each day on the first weekend.
Wow.
Which was, and I think for a while it continued like that, Saturday, Sunday, like just back to back people playing. And artists really wanted that. They had nothing else to do, and we're all like, what's happening? So I think that first week they did an amazing job of just programming really great artists to be involved in it, and it was amazing. It was like that first weekend I watched the 8 hours both days. Like I feel like I had like a sore neck and sore arms and everything from just being like glued to my phone screen or computer screen watching all the amazing live streams. And it was this really organic way for people to feel connected again, and to feel connected to music, because it had been a few weeks since all the shows had stopped. And there was just this organic need to want to connect with artists again, and artists needing to connect with their audiences. And so it just the first weekend was incredible, really. It was just like and then it just snowballed from there. And I don't think even Emily thought that it would still be going now, but it is. And it's really amazing. And she's done incredible work to like reinvent it, and all the different themes and things she's done over this entire year now. I can't take a lot of credit. We just do the PR for it. Like it's been Emily's brainchild, and she's done an incredible job to kind of make it what it is now, which is a brilliant brand, and something that I'm sure will kind of carry on, and something that everyone will remember this year as something that brought the music community together when everyone was really struggling, I think. So
it's such a positive idea all the way around. Like everyone really kind of was a winner in that process. Everyone kind of got what they needed. It was overwhelmingly positive. So you mentioned you were going to go overseas. You were going to go to South by Southwest. When I first met you was at a music conference, and I can't remember if you had just recently come back from South by Southwest, or you had like earlier that year, but you were managing 3 bands at South by Southwest, or 5 acts?
Four bands. Yes. Oh, did you see that panel? Okay. That was a very iconic panel, because I was very scarred from the experience of taking 4 bands overseas all at the same time. So I had a lot of very real things to say about it.
You're probably recommending people not do that. I can't remember.
I was like, well, I definitely, my experience is not to be mirrored, I don't think. But
it definitely was a standout. Like, it made me think like, whoa, all right, she's like going for it. She's very passionate about her bands, about her music. Like, she's a person to keep tabs on. Because she's making things happen.
Well, it was just a really interesting time. If I look back to that, and it was probably 3 years ago, or 3 or 4 years ago, probably 3 years ago. And each of the artists had got the opportunity, and I didn't expect them all to get in, and all were having success in different parts of their careers, and it seemed like the right time for all of them. And I just thought it wasn't my place to say to anyone that they couldn't go. Like, I had a lot of managers say to me, oh, I would have just taken the best 2 and told the others it wasn't the right time. And I was like, I'm not the type of person that if someone has an amazing opportunity to go and showcase at South by Southwest, who am I to take that away from them, and that's why, but it was definitely challenging, and it's not something I would do again in hindsight. But also I probably wouldn't I don't know that I would be in a situation like that. It was kind of right at the start of when things were really kicking off for my business, and I had a really great roster of artists then that were all kind of at this level of a lot of things happening for them. And yeah, it was a very unique situation.
Yeah.
Challenging, but I learned a lot from it. And yeah, good and bad, but good. It's mostly good.
Yeah, there's sort of two things I wanted to ask about it. One is, firstly, the idea, the value of showcasing. Do you recommend artists do it? At what stage in their career? What's it best for, etc.? And then I'll get to the part two.
I do think it's very important. I'm a strong believer in those music conferences, and some of my bands have had brilliant opportunities come out of them. Most of them, actually. And I think, but there is a certain point when you're ready to showcase. Like, I just don't think that anyone should be rushing out to do it if you don't have, you know, a plan for yourself, or there's not music coming out, or you don't have a fully formed band, or your sound isn't actualized. You know, there's a real point in an artist's career, because if you go too soon at one of those things, it won't be successful for you. You want to feel very confident in what you have to showcase, basically, because you are showcasing, and all of the music industry is there to see new music and discover new music. So you want to make sure that when you're choosing to go to, if it's Big Sound in Australia, or you know, South by Southwest, The Great Escape, Reeperbahn in Germany, any of those things, you want to make sure you're presenting the best version of your music, and that there's a reason to go. Because I've actually worked with artists who were, one artist who was accepted to Big Sound, and we decided not to go because when we put in the application earlier in the year, we thought it would be the right thing, but when she got accepted a few months later, it wasn't right. She wasn't ready. Her band wasn't ready. So we turned down the application. And I think even Big Sound was a bit shocked that we had turned it down, because they thought she was ready. But at the end of the day, if the artist doesn't feel like they're ready, there's no point doing it, because you want to make sure that you get the most out of those things. Because as I said, all those people are there, and, you know, and it only takes one person in a room to change a career of an artist. And if the right person ends up seeing your music, it can pave the way for a lot of things. So yeah, I'm a firm believer in those conferences. I think they're really, really amazing, but I do think you need to pick your moment when you get the opportunity to go. Just because you get accepted doesn't mean that it's the right time. You need to make sure that it is going to be the right time for you, and that you can get the most out of the opportunity.
Yeah, awesome. And well, this is probably a very simple question, but do you think there's something that artists should be attending anyway when they get the chance? I mean, you know, flying to South by Southwest may not be worth it just to get up to date with what's happening in the industry, but maybe it is. Is it a decent idea to go?
I think it's a great idea to go before you do it. I think, and that's what we ended up doing with the artist who declined, who was like, I'm not going to do it this year because I'm not ready. She went up and experienced it as like a punter, like going to the shows, watching what happens, because I think, you know, as far as doing that with international conferences, it might not be feasible because, you know, you have to fly to America and it's quite expensive. But I think for something like South by Southwest, if fingers crossed, hopefully it happens in the same capacity that it has previously, going there prior to playing it would give you a better understanding of just like, because the first time I ever went to South by Southwest was I was going there with 4 bands, like, and I'd never been before. And it was just like, whoa, like this is, oh no, actually that's a lie. No, the first time I went to South by Southwest, I only had 2 bands. I lied. The second time I went, I had 4 bands. Sorry, I forgot. The 4 bands thing just overshadowed the time before that because, but yeah, the first time I went, I took 2 bands, and yeah, that was probably good, but I would have hoped, it would have been helpful for me to go and experience it without any bands first as a manager to kind of understand it. Because now I've also been, not this year, but the year before, I actually didn't have any bands playing South by Southwest, but I went anyway, because I think that it's actually, even if you don't have an artist showcasing, it's really important place to meet people and to kind of I was doing a lot of different things, and it was actually really nice to go to one of those conferences and not be running around after bands and not having all these like things that you have to do, and kind of just going there as an attendee and being able to experience it as opposed to experiencing it for an actual like purpose. So my recommendation would be definitely, don't feel disappointed about not getting in. If you're applying for the first time and you don't get accepted, consider going and having a look and understanding how it works and how you can actually get the most out of it when your time comes. Yeah,
cool. And that also perfectly leads into the second part of the question where you mentioned you went anyway to meet people, because the networking aspect, networking can have a gross tone to it, but like community or your connections, whatever it is, that it's, it's your network. That was another thing I noticed at Big Sound, that you had a natural knack for networking. And I think it stems back to something else that we've been talking about, which is authenticity. I think you were just authentically connecting with people. But I wanted to ask just the importance of network in all the things you've been doing, but I suppose also for artists, but just how important is networking, and give us some cool networking tips.
I don't love the word networking, like it just like nobody does. I think for me it comes down to having a presence, and in the music industry you kind of have to be present physically, like at events and meeting people, and then also working with them. It kind of adds a new element. They see you as a real person. You're having a drink with them at the bar, you're watching music together. It kind of makes you real, as opposed to just someone on the end of an email, and then, so for people going to these type of conferences for the first time, you'll meet people and then you can actually email them and they go, oh, I know who you are because I had a drink with you, or I bumped into you walking down the street or whatever. And that, we're humans, we like connection, we like to know people face to face. And sometimes it'll be like, oh, I met you here, and you're like, oh yeah, great, I actually know this person. They're not just a letters on a screen, so at the end of the day, I think it's just human nature to want to connect with people on a physical level, and that is something that really plays into the music industry. And that's why I think those, and it's not for everyone. A lot of people have social anxieties and are socially awkward, and that's okay. There's other ways to do things if that's not, if you don't feel comfortable in those social situations, don't put yourself there. Like I'm a lot for a real advocate for mental health and what makes you feel good in the music industry, because there's a lot of things that we do that can make you feel not well in the brain. So just don't do them. If going out every night and meeting people isn't your thing, then don't do it. Like, you just find another way to connect, and there are other ways. But
find someone to advocate for you. I mean, that's what you essentially do for your band members. And I've seen other artists do that at Big Sound. Someone who was showcasing just brought their closest friend to just go to meetings and go do all that other stuff. And it It was very effective.
Because some people really enjoy it and others don't, and that's okay. Like that's okay. Get someone else. Yeah, and that's it. And it can whatever works for you, I think, is important to remember, especially because the social side of the music industry can feel a bit much sometimes, especially when you're new at it or you don't feel like you know a lot of people. But the only really way you break through that is continuing to go to those things. Like it becomes easier the more times you've been and the more people you know and the more comfortable you feel in those social situations. But entering into the music industry can be daunting because it just seems like everyone knows each other and there's this whole clique of people, and it's like, how do I navigate that? And there isn't really, I can't really tell you how to do that because it's really personal. Everyone should just do what feels good for them. Never, you know, you don't want to walk away from something and feel like, oh, I felt so uncomfortable and awkward and I didn't like it. You know, that's never a good feeling. So,
I find something that's helpful is at those things that I just remember that everyone's there to meet someone. You know, it's like people are so open to meeting. That's why they're there. They kind of want to meet people. So going up to someone, they're kind of welcoming that in a way. They're expecting it. It's not like you're just accosting them on the street and like, hey, I want to talk to you about this thing. The context is already sort of warmed up for meeting, which is helpful to be like, oh, this person probably wants me to go and talk to them. So I'll just go say hi.
Definitely. And I think that's important to remember and people from the music industry are there to discover new music. So it's like anyone who who works in the music industry and is at one of those conferences and doesn't want to be approached is probably, I don't know, like they probably need to take a check in with themselves and see what they're actually doing, because the social side of things can be hard to navigate, but it is about having a presence and kind of face to face, knowing someone can make all the difference, or just having that little connection where someone goes, oh no, I met you at the bar, that's right, cool. I know there's a cognitive thing in my brain that says I know you because I've seen you. Like, so it's,
and then immediately the trust level just goes up. Like, oh, you're a physical human being who seems to have good intentions. So we can probably collaborate and have a conversation.
Definitely.
Yeah, it's very, very powerful. And a real challenge in this sort of digital time and digital age where we can reach millions of people potentially, but not always in the same way. Cool. So maybe to finish off, I was thinking, because we've sort of been talking a little bit about this idea of either mental health or taking care of that. It's not really something I've spoken very much about on the podcast, but because I was going to ask, you know, what's the number one thing you feel like artists should focus on, just to at this present time, whether it's they should just be focusing on songwriting or they should be connecting with an audience, whatever it is. But we've been talking about mental health, so I don't know if that's one of the things you think people really need to take care of. But
I think, I was going to say it's really interesting because I've had a lot of chats with different managers and different artists over this, last 9 months of craziness that we've all been experiencing. And, a lot of people are like, oh, this is the time when everyone should be writing their best music because they have all this spare time, and like artists should be creating and that's what they should be doing. But also we've all gone through a really crazy time. Like people have lost jobs, income, like everything has changed. How is that conducive to creativity? Like, how is that conducive to creating your best work? Yes, for one person, it might be putting them in a situation. Yes, they have lots to write about, but for someone else, they might be really depressed. They might be really struggling. Not being able to be on stage every night might have put them in a really bad place. So I don't think putting pressure on artists at a time like this to be creative and to have written their best music and to be using this time, which is everyone is like, this time we have all this spare time, like it needs to be put to use. But I think we need to be gentle on ourselves. We've all been through crazy shift, crazy change. If you're not feeling creative, that's okay. If you are, amazing, but don't put this whole pressure on artists and creatives to be churning out output now, because I think that's very unhealthy. And you know, as I've said it a few times, just do what makes you feel good in the brain. Like I think there's always in the music industry and in all creative industries, there's this pressure to create and to always be creating, but that's not possible all the time. And it's definitely not possible in the middle of a pandemic when, you know, and the pandemic is only one of the crazy things that we've seen happen this year. Like, you know, so it's like there's a lot of different levels. And I think, mental health this year really has to be at the forefront. If you feel creative, great. If you don't, that's okay too. Like I just don't think we should be putting pressure on people in this heightened year that we've been having.
Yeah, great. Yeah, it's a great message. And it's very true, the thing of if you are suffering from any anxiety in this period, it totally shuts off the creative part of your brain, like the prefrontal cortex, like it literally closes it down. So trying to force it and then feeling like I'm hopeless because I can't do this right now can add even more stress. And so I think it's really great advice. And it's been a really great conversation and nice to meet you this time in the virtual flesh, but hopefully in the real world again. Thanks.
Yes, thanks so it feels like we'll be out in the real world again soon. It does definitely feel like that. So fingers crossed we can, you know, do the thing that I was talking about, connect in real life, because that feels like a real connection. How our brains work.
Yeah, cool. Well, thanks heaps, Lorraine.
Yes, thank you.
So thanks to Lorraine for that great conversation. We went all over the place. Hopefully you found that really valuable if you're an artist or you're just interested in music and how the industry works. Lorraine has been at it for a long time. She's seen all the twists and turns, so I hope you enjoyed that. There's going to be links beneath this video in the description where you can find out all about our golden friend, Isolade, and many of Lorraine's artists and other things we talked about, so you can check that out. If you want to get a free download of some of my songs, you can head to mijobiscan.com/free music. You can get a couple of free tunes to download. If you want to buy a CD, my latest album, Golden Moment, you can head to mijobiscan.com/GMCD. You get a personalized CD sent to your home, wherever you are in the world. Apart from that, if you would be so inclined to like this, share it, chuck it on social media, send me an email, do whatever you want to do with this podcast and spread the love, that would be much appreciated. And I look forward to seeing you on the next episode very soon. Bye for now.